Who will be better in 2025, Utah football or BYU football? We're breaking it down on today's Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars crossover.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time tuning into either of our shows, make sure you like and subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is JT Wistrcill, the host of Locked On Utes, joined by the host of Locked On BYU Cougars, since we have multiple Locked On Cougars, even just in the Big 12 itself. One thing that's going to be interesting to see is who's the top team in the Big 12 in the state of Utah this season. Jake, I'm going to let you go first. I'm in a good mood tonight, so I want to let you go first. Utah or BYU, who's better in 2025?
Well, I'm going to go with the homerific take and say I'm going to say BYU by a nose. But the point I'm trying to make here, JT, is I believe that both BYU and Utah are going to be very competitive this fall. I'm talking about across the board. I think both of these programs are locked and loaded. But I don't get, and I'll get your thought on this. I don't get why so many people are downgrading BYU simply because of the Jake Retzlaff departure. This is a BYU team last year that got a lot done with its defense, with its special teams, and also its offense at times. But in some cases, it actually won in spite of Jake at times. And that's the thing about this is I'm not saying that BYU is going to soar past what they did a season ago, because you go 11-2, that's hard to replicate, especially at the Power 4 level. But I believe that both of these programs, I think Utah with a new offense, a new quarterback that should be far more effective than it was a season ago. I see both of these teams kind of sitting in that 8-9 win range, and I'm going to say BYU by a nose, maybe getting to 9-3, whereas I see Utah maybe as an 8-4. Where are you at?
I'm lower on BYU. I've been talking about it for a while, and especially those of you that watched our squad show yesterday. I meant what I said when I came at BYU hard and said that this is, to me, of any team ranked in the preseason top 25, I don't feel like they belong there. They have the biggest question mark and unknown at the most important position on the field. We can also talk about some of the other questions I have about this roster, because you return some talent, but you have some questions. But to me, I think BYU does take a decent step back. I have them under that 8-win total because of the quarterback options. You and I used to call McCae Hillstead's games. I really like him. It's also a fact. He's 0 for 3 in games he's thrown over 20 or more passes. And if you talk about any of the QB options, you get Bourguet as a guy. He's never thrown for more than 750 yards in a season too. You also got Bachmeier, the true freshman. That's a lot to ask him to come in right away. So that massive of a question mark at the biggest position in a conference with as many strong quarterbacks as the Big 12 has. And I think Devon Dampier is going to be one of those. I think BYU's taking a step back this year. I was surprised to see them in the top 25. I don't believe they belong there. I believe Utah will be better than BYU by multiple wins this season.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm gonna push back on that, JT. Is this is a BYU team that made the nation ooh and ah in their win over Colorado in that Alamo Bowl, and Jake Retzlaff didn't have a single touchdown throw in that game. He had 2 interceptions, in fact. As I said, this is a BYU team. Yes, you're losing your quarterback, and that cannot be ignored here. But BYU has an elite defense. Its special teams was special a season ago. You can ask Utah, that kick return for a touchdown against the Utes that Keelan Marion had. I know that Keelan's gone, but that kick return for a touchdown was absolutely critical in that win. And that leads me to believe that whereas I understand why people are downgrading BYU because of Retzlaff, but I say this all the time. BYU fans are very used to having great or elite quarterback play, and Jake Retzlaff, he is in the good category. He's in that third tier down. And if you can even replicate that type of quarterback play from one of these three or the combination of the 3 quarterbacks at BYU, I got a lot of belief that BYU, they may set back a game or 2, but I still think 8-4, 9-3 is absolutely within reach for BYU, particularly because Kalani has always stated that, and much like Kyle Whittingham, he wants all 3 phases of the game to contribute in those wins.
Who do you think will be BYU's starting quarterback? And do you believe who starts the season there will finish the season under center?
To answer the first question, I believe it'll be McCae Hillstead when they take on Portland State. We're just over 3 weeks away from that, so looking forward, obviously, to the season starting. But I believe it'll be McCae Hillstead to start the season. Now, I'm saying that today. That could change tomorrow, within an hour, within the next 5 minutes, because BYU can make an announcement at any time. But I do not believe that McCae is guaranteed to finish the season, because I think Bear Bachmeier, he has got all the talent in the world to be one of the good or to great quarterbacks of the next crop for BYU, because he has all of the physical tools. 6'2", 220 plus pounds. He's got a really nice arm. And so long as he hones his craft and gets up to speed well enough that BYU feels comfortable with him, I absolutely believe that he could take over at some point this season, replacing McCae. So yeah, to answer your question, I think it's McCae today, but maybe by the time BYU and Utah face off in week 7, it could be Bear Bachmeier.
How much better is McCae from the guy who had an 11-8 touchdown interception ratio at Utah State, was sacked 18 times? A lot of that on the offensive line. Number of that also as well gonna be on him when you're sacked that many times, I feel like, too. How ready is he to be this guy for a BYU team with massive aspirations? When, as I mentioned too, Jake, 0-3, and it's not quarterback stat. Wins are not a quarterback stack, but 0-3 in games you threw 20 or more passes did catch my eye.
18 sacks and 4 starts he had, 4 career starts at Utah State, if I'm not mistaken. So. That's way too many sacks. And I'm telling you, BYU's offensive line is far better than that offensive line, the Swiss cheese. I'll say that he played behind at Utah State. I think that he is more ready now because he's been through those wars at Utah State. He's played in a system at BYU for over a year now where he's been practicing in this. I think he's far more capable now than he ever has been before. And I will also add this, JT. When he played at Utah State, if he was more than $180 in terms of his overall weight, I'd be stunned. He has filled out quite nicely at BYU, and they list him at 190 pounds. I'd be very surprised if he's below that number, because I really do think he's bulked up with the whole thought process that what he endured at Utah State, he does not want to see that happen to him again. I don't have any way to justify my belief in him being a better quarterback, because as you mentioned, those stats, they're pretty damning. But I still believe that BYU and Aaron Roderick will get the most out of whoever they put under center. They've proven it before, and they'll prove it again.
They have, and there's some nice pieces there. We can talk more about BYU in a moment. I'll talk a little bit real quick about why I think Utah is going to be better than BYU this season, and why I also just think this is genuinely going to be one of the top teams in the Big 12 as we sit here right now. I do have Utah bouncing back in the Big 12 title game, all the things of that nature. Why do I feel that way? Or
okay,
what do you want to throw in? Go.
Okay, so yeah, you're picking Utah to make it to Arlington.
I am.
Why? Like, because this is Utah's defense was elite last year, much like BYU was absolutely elite. But that offense, it failed this team. Do you think that offense can bounce back to that high of a level under Jason Beck and Devon Dampier, where they can get to 10 wins?
I do. I think this offense makes a major leap forward, even though I actually think both our defenses, we finished 1 and 2 in the conference. I think both our defenses are coming a little bit down from that. Both top 5 units in the conference, but I think because of what they lost, and actually both questions along the defensive line, I might add as well too, waiting to see some guys that are going to emerge. One of them, of course, being Keanu Tanavasa for BYU. But
I've seen Keanu with my own eyes in practice, JT. Dude is downright dominant. He cannot be blocked one-on-one.
I was having I remember I said I was in a good mood at the start of this. Then you had to throw that in there. Get me upset.
I'm just saying. Tausili Akana, another transfer in from the University of Texas. He's been a tackle for loss machine in the media portions we've been able to watch down there in Provo. I know that BYU lost all of its starting defensive line from last year, but I'm telling you, they reloaded that unit. And Jay Hill, you can tell he's pretty bullish on this defense when he talks to the media. I'm just throwing that out there.
Jay Hill is bullish on BYU's defensive line. I'm bullish on Utah. I'm going to tell you why in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about the baseball action under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling with FanDuel? You can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I'm using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. You know what else is available on FanDuel? The 2025 win totals for Utah and BYU. I already said I'm a little down on BYU.
Over on the Cougars.
But guess what, Jake? I'm going to take the over. 6.5 is low. And you guys have a favorable schedule, I'll say too, with a couple of those games. So I do have BYU getting over 6.5. I'm right in that. I'm at 7 right now. I think 7-5 right now. But I think 6.5 is too low for this team that was a contender just a season ago. That's how I feel about BYU. How do you feel about Utah at over or under 7.5?
I already said I have them at 8-4 at minimum. So I'd be hitting the over on that.
We are going to agree on one thing this show, and we can both agree that you should head over to FanDuel to check out all the odds for college football, NFL, or whatever sports action floats your boat today. Utah is going to bounce back. We both agree with that. I'm so high on their bounce back, I think they end up in Arlington. Why is that? Devon Dampier being one of the biggest reasons. I think he's a star in the making at QB. I think, Jake, he's going to end the season in the top 10 of the Heisman voting. I believe this is a transcendent quarterback. I believe he's going to be one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football this season. One of the only quarterback in the country to throw for 2,500 yards, rush for 1,000 yards. Back with the offensive coordinator that together were fourth in yards per game a season ago at New Mexico. Devon Dampier only sacked 5 times last year. He should have been sacked 5 times alone in the 3 P4-ish teams he played, because I'm including Washington State in that as well, but only sacked 5 times. Second, according to Pro Football Focus, in forced missed tackles a season ago, with the best tackle duo in college football, maybe soon to be first round picks. I'll add to a really good offensive line. It's top 10 in the country. I like the options at running back. Questions at receiver, and a Utah defense that, even if they're a little worse to me, still going to be one of the 5 best units in the Big 12, because Morgan Scalley has that group ready to go. Love the linebackers and secondaries. Just some questions along this D-line. I think Kyle Whittingham this year will go out on top, as he's been wanting to do for what feels like the last couple with Utah.
Okay, so here's my question, JT. If you're so down on McCae Hillstead at 5'10", $190, what makes you think that Devon Dampier can overcome 5'11", 200 pounds? That makes him different. Does that make sense? That's my question here.
It does. It's just the fact that we've seen him have success. Like, he balled against Arizona
at the G6 level. I
know, but he did well against Arizona. He played well against
Arizona. Was awful.
I know, but they're still a P14.
Arizona's awful. Sorry. The bottom of the Big 12. Great. Okay, fantastic. Next.
Yeah, Auburn. He did well against Auburn too, is the other one too. I'm just saying he looked good. What are you going to say about our boss, Zach Blackerby, Steve? What are you going to say?
Auburn wasn't that good either. Zach, come at me if you want. I think Auburn's going to be better this year, but they were pretty down last year. Okay, I get why Utah fans are bullish on Devon Dampier because of the stats, but he is stepping up in a level of competition. We got to acknowledge the fact that he's stepping into a Power 4 level now. And I get the stats. They're gaudy. Trust me. I watched a lot of New Mexico football because of the Bronco Mendenhall connection and the like, and I was really impressed with Dampier. I think he is going to be at least at minimum, I'd say at minimum, an above average quarterback in the Big 12 this season. And that's far better than what Utah had a season ago after they lost Cam Rising. And I'm just not 100% convinced that he's going to, as you say, a top 10 Heisman contender. That's incredible, JT. I got to give you props, man. That is a take.
I appreciate it. I'm high on this team, man. And I really think when I look at it too, I'm not the only one. Talked to Ari Wasserman of On3 at Big 12 Media Days. He called Dampier one of the 5 most exciting players in the sport. CBS Sports also put out a list. They had Dampier in the top 10 quarterbacks. And as I mentioned, there's a number of statistics. Jake Hatch, who led college football in yards per carry last season?
Was it Devon Dampier?
Was Devon Dampier. Like, that's how good we're talking about this guy being. I understand the questions going against, even if it was, like you said, lesser P4 teams, but mostly G5 teams last year. But to me, there's a world of difference between him and McCae Hillstead, because he had, number one, he's just played and started a lot more, but he's also had success at the G5 level. And he just have success. Like, he dominated at the G5 level. So that's why I think he's ready. I'm also not going to sit here and act like, hey, I think that like that first game against UCLA, I could see him tossing a couple of interceptions there. This is a guy who did throw 12 picks last year, but it's also a guy to me that is going to have that connection with his wide receivers. They're already building it in camp. Ryan Davis being one of the ones. I just feel like, and let's also, like, everyone gets wrapped up in 12-12 touchdown to interception ratio. If you include the rushing touchdowns, he had over 30 touchdowns last season. So nearly 20 more touchdowns in total than INTs, playing with a better supporting cast. He was one of the best things about that offense a season ago too. That New Mexico defense was dreadful. So with a much better defense too, I'm expecting big things out of Dampier. I'll talk about what I think about the rest of the BYU roster. We've hit on the quarterbacks now a lot. What do you think about the rest of this Utah team outside of the quarterback position?
Oh, I think it's the best offensive line in the country. I don't have a
wow.
problem saying that. I think Caleb Lomu, I think Spencer Fano, that tackle combo is special. When you have three other upperclassmen offensive linemen on the interior alongside them, I asked Kyle Whittingham the question at Big 12 Media Days, and he kind of demurred on it. He's like, I haven't studied the other offensive lines. I get it, but I really think that offensive line, at worst, it's top 10 at the very worst in the country. And I always trust that Morgan Scally and Kyle Whittingham are going to have at least a good, if not great defense. And I fully expect that they will be just fine. Now, the question I have, much like BYU has, is the defensive line for Utah. Whereas BYU picked off probably Utah's best defensive tackle, bringing Keanu Vasa south. That helps BYU. I've still got some questions on the interior of Utah's defensive line, but those will be answered in time. I expect that, as mentioned, Kyle and Morgan will get that squared away. I really do think the biggest question for me is who in the heck is Devon Dampier going to throw the football to? Because let's be honest, Utah's wide receiving core, it's a place that good wide receivers go to die, JT.
Unfortunately, it has been. I will say number one receivers have done okay there. Even
number one don't even go. What number one?
Who's Dorian Singer? Dorian Singer has 700 yards last year. Okay. And Devon Vele the year before that. We got some guys, man. We got some guys, not the best guys, but we got some guys in there overall.
Your best guy left after spring ball.
I know. Yeah. I actually think Tobias Merriweather is a name to keep an eye on. Back-to-back weeks, they've been raving about him. He has to put it all together. Former four-star at Notre Dame, battled injuries and inconsistencies at Notre Dame and Cal. But if he can put it all together, and we've said that a lot about Utah wide receivers before.
I was going to say, this sounds eerily familiar to literally every year I've covered Utah doing sports radio for the past 15 years in Utah.
You're right. No, and you're right. There are still questions there. The fact that you have Ryan Davis, though, coming with Devon Dampier, he had 700 yards a season ago with him, I think is exciting too. Darren Zipper's a guy who got experience, been turning some heads. Larry Simmons had 400 plus yards at Southern Miss last year. So it's not going to be the strength of this team by any stretch of the imagination, but people are going to load the box. And I think they got enough guys to win one-on-one on the outside.
I hope they do, because we have not talked about what I believe are the true X factors for both of these teams. It's the running backs, Wayshawn Parker, LJ Martin. I'm telling you, Utah football, I'm talking speaking of the state of Utah in terms of football fans, get to know those names. Wayshawn and LJ, if not, in my opinion, they're going to be top 5 backs in this conference. I've watched LJ in practice this fall already, and he looks the part. Everything I've heard about Wayshawn Parker is that he's expected to really burst onto the scene. And that's the big differentiator, I feel like, for both of these teams, JT, is if they can get the type of rushing attacks. And Aaron Roderick said it himself the second day of fall camp for BYU. He says, we expect to run the football this fall. And that is going to be the key for BYU to make whoever ends up as their quarterback comfortable, is to have an elite running game. LJ Martin, Sione Mo will be the 1-2 combo for BYU. And I'm telling you, the running games for both of these programs, we can talk about wide receivers, we can talk about quarterback play, but unless the running games show up for both of these teams, they're not going anywhere anytime fast.
I agree with that. Also, just, speaking of Martin, I haven't gotten to do this yet. So I want to say some nice things about BYU, because I already said you guys are getting over your win total.
And listeners are excited for this. Go, JT. Fire away on the Cougars.
I think Chase Roberts is one of the best receivers in the Big 12. I really like Martin. I think Carson Ryan is going to have the type of year at BYU that, had we had better quarterback play, he could have had at Utah last year. Like the interior offensive line, even though you lost Pay, I do think that's a bit of a loss there. Obviously love Jay Hill on the defense, one of the best linebacking cores in all of college football. To me, Tanu Vasa is going to be a monster this season. And I think overall, the defense, I like the pieces, but there are some unknowns I would add there too, which lead me into some of my negatives. I just want to see how that defensive line is going to gel. Outside of Robertson, who else is going to step up at receiver? No one on your receiving core had over 215 yards last year for BYU. So is Parker Kingston ready to be that guy, right? Those are the questions I still want to see. Also, I have major questions at your 2 tackle spots. So I want to see how those guys are going to come through and get along as well. So I have questions at quarterback, defensive line, and offensive tackle. Those are the 3 most important positions in football to me. That's why I think BYU will not be in contention to make the Big 12 title game by the time we get to the last week of the regular season.
Get to know the names: Isaiah Jota and Andrew Gentry, JT. They are BYU's offensive tackles, and so far so good in fall camp. Obviously, Andrew Gentry and a certain BYU fan out there said he actually has more Rose Bowl wins than the entire Utah roster right now from his time at Michigan. That's a simple fact of life. He does have a Rose Bowl win on his resume from his time with the Wolverines. He absolutely looks like he is 100% healthy coming off a foot injury that he suffered at Michigan last year. And BYU took the rare senior you bring in as a transfer, JT, last year, and Isaiah Jota from Colorado, and redshirted him. They legitimately redshirted a senior last year, and they expect that combo right there to step in and fill the voids that they lost at tackle last year. And as I mentioned, what I've seen, I've probably watched an hour and 20 minutes of practice so far in terms of the availability that BYU offers us. And I got to say, the two of them, they look like they're ready to step up and fill the void at offensive tackle in particular.
Is that because they're not going against good defensive ends?
They are actually going against
I know they
that have to prove themselves, obviously. But I'm telling you, Tausili Akana, he is a transfer. Obviously, you and I called his games at Skyridge High School. He went to Texas, never really saw the field there at Texas. But if what I have seen in training camp is any indication, he's ready to burst onto the scene as a defensive end for BYU.
Top-ranked player in the state, too, at the time of his class as well. I remember that. Also say this, huge fan of Siale Acera. I hope he has a monster year with BYU. And I do still hope Tanu Vasa has success, and I think he will, too. I think he's going to have a great year as well. And I'll also say this, though, Jake, as we just kind of talk about, like, hey, we're a few months away from our two teams getting the chance to finally face off against one another. I think Utah does end the streak as we sit here right now, BYU's little 2-game winning streak. I have Utah winning down south. How do you see that game playing out this far away?
3 is coming, JT. 3 is coming.
It's like your Gollum impression or something for a moment. My precious.
I'm just channeling my inner, like, I don't know, Twitter keyboard warrior right there. 3 is coming.
One thing that's been coming really nicely for BYU is several elite recruits, and you guys have done very well recruiting wise. How does the future of recruiting in the state of Utah and just the recruiting of these two programs look moving forward? That's what we're going to discuss in one moment. Recruiting is something that BYU has been doing very well, not just on basketball, but football as well. Utah was close to really making like the in-state recruiting for the 26 class. If Utah was able to close the deal on Celeste Moa, I think that would have been a nice push.
So close.
But unfortunately, they didn't. So BYU is a top 20 recruiting class at the time we're recording this, and Utah, last I checked, is still outside the top 40. So that's definitely hurts. If it's not, recruiting isn't the end all be all. As we know, Utah's at 50 right now, but
I didn't even think it was at the top 50 yet. They're at 50 right now. Okay.
They are just at 50, barely in there. What have you made of BYU's recruiting success? And Brock Harris, Bachmeier, those are two of my favorite players in the state. I do think that's massive for BYU.
Don't forget the man, the myth, the legend that is already Ryder Lyons, everybody. But here's the thing, JT. In many respects, and you most of your Ute followers and listeners will know that I've been doing sports radio here in Salt Lake City for a long time. In so many different ways, this feels like the inverse of what Utah and BYU recruiting has been for quite literally since Utah went into the Pac-12. Routinely, Utah would have at worst felt like a top 30 class, whereas BYU settled somewhere between 50 and 70 in those 24/7 sports rankings. And I'm talking, that was an annual deal. It felt like, BYU would pop up every so often, maybe get into the 40s, and Utah often would jump inside the top 25, but BYU is really doing work on the transfer portal side of things, but more importantly in the high school ranks here in the state of Utah. And that is in no small part due to the fact that last year, simply put, Utah was 5-7, BYU's 11-2, ranked 13th in the country. Players want to go where they're going to, at least in their mind, have a chance to win at a high level, and BYU's cleaning up on that right now. Is that going to continue for the foreseeable future? Hey, from my side of things, I'm all for it, because obviously that means good for business in my world when it comes to covering the Cougars on a daily basis. But I've got a trust that if and when the Kyle Whittingham run is over at Utah, Morgan Scalley will keep things going for Utah. The biggest thing I've got concerns about, JT, is if BYU can truly own this state as much as they have in this recruiting class, Utah has got to be concerned that if they can't make inroads in state, it's going to hurt what has been an absolute pillar of strength for the Utes over the years.
I believe it's the first time in 5 years Utah hasn't landed multiple top 5 players in the state.
That's the thing about this. As I said, I've covered sport. I've been doing the sports radio thing in Salt Lake, and we talk recruiting often on DJ and PK on the show that I produce for the KSL Sports Zone. And it's been stunning, quite frankly. And yes, the Celeste Moa thing, it threw a bunch of people for a loop. I absolutely believe that wholeheartedly, that it threw certain people that believed in their heart of hearts that Celeste was going to stay in state. I had heard for many, many months until recently that he had eyes to go out of state, and then it had shifted where it sounded like Utah was absolutely in the mix. Well, ultimately, the intel I was provided early on proved to be the true fact that he wanted to go out of the state of Utah, and that hurts because Utah, as you mentioned, they don't really have anybody into the top 10 of the state of Utah, which, let's be honest, it's a gem when it comes to recruiting in the state of Utah. We may not have the overall numbers that a Texas, a Georgia, a California, or a Florida have in terms of the overall athletes, simply due to the fact we don't have as big of a population. But I'm telling you, on a per capita basis, the state of Utah is absolutely punching above its weight when it comes to the quality of athletes that the state produces. And BYU's been cleaning up on it, and they're going to benefit from it for years to come.
Totally agree with that. And especially if we look at what BYU has been able to do too. I mean, not only we mentioned some of these guys, right? Like the Tassilia Kanas, the Hunter Clegg, Siale Acera, the offensive lineman who was at Timpview and then went to Bishop Gorman. That is a hard last name to pronounce. Jake.
Kalani Avalu. There you go. Yeah.
That's why we used to work together. Good partnership right there. So you just look at what this BYU team's been able to do, and it has been really strong. And Utah's got guys I like, right? Like Jaron Poole is a nice get for Utah. I think Kenan Poole will be a good player too. I actually really like Isaiah Guy. I forget to say Timpview safety. I think he's going to end up being a guy for this team too. But it's unfortunate for Utah that they have lost that stronghold on recruiting in the state, because who are some of Utah's top players right now? Smith Snowden, Lander Barton, and Spencer Votto. And all of those guys were massive recruiting wins. And if BYU does end up, and like I said, maybe they will still be at the top of the conference this year, reach it there. Like it'll probably be in part because Akana came on as a pass rusher and was a guy.
And that to that point, JT, is Utah and BYU are never going to keep every kid in this state. Utah as a state is too well known to the Pac-12 schools, clear across the country in terms of the quality of athletes this state produces. So you are going to lose guys out of state. That's just a simple fact of life. But BYU and Utah need to keep as many of these guys at home. And the nice part is a lot of the kids that grow up in the state, I'm saying guys who moved in maybe in high school and played here. I'm talking guys, true homegrown talents. A lot of people don't want to leave this state, and you've got to make it compelling for them to want to stick around. You know how you do that? If you're Utah, you just go back and bounce back this year. You believe that Utah can make a run at the Big 12 title game. If they pull that off, guess what? It would not surprise me to see this recruiting battle come 2027 class completely different. Right now, BYU's got the upper hand, and they're going to have to maintain that. NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff comes into effect when it comes to that. I know that they've changed the rules on this, JT, but I think you and I both believe it's one lawsuit away from going right back to the way it was. It just feels that way. But the bigger point is BYU has got a hot hand right now. They're going to have to maintain that. But Utah, they can get right back off the deck and right back into this race with a strong season in 2025.
It can flip quickly. And I think Utah's offense, Jake, if you had a penny for every time someone said this, you'd be a rich man too. Like this offense under Jason Beck could finally be that explosive one they've been wanting it to be a long time. So that's where you maybe get a chance to land the elite quarterback like BYU did this class.
Yeah, you need to get top shelf quarterback talent, and you need to get some wide receivers at Utah. Guess what? The type of offense that Kyle Whittingham's been running for the past 10-ish years with the double and triple tight end sets, guess what? Quarterbacks and wide receivers are like, yeah, thanks, but I'm going to go over here. You can change that with Jason Beck's offense. I fully acknowledge that. Aaron Roderick's offense is attractive to guys like Grider Lions because it's high flying, wide open. It features deep shots. It's got strong running game elements to it. That's what guys want to play in this modern era of college football. And I will tip my cap to Kyle Whittingham. It had to be really, really difficult for him to say, hey, I'm going to embrace this whole newfangled spread offense that Jason Beck's bringing to Salt Lake City. But I got to wholeheartedly believe that Morgan Scalley is the head coach in waiting was saying, Kyle, you got to understand, if we want to get the type of dudes that can help us get to the top of the Big 12, get to the Big 12 title game, win college football playoff games and the like, we have to have the type of offense that guys want to play in, and that's what Jason Beck offers.
It is. And the one thing Utah's done well is they've just developed their offensive linemen so well. So that's where you've continued to land the elite guys there. You got an Ike Garcia waiting in the wings, the guy from Utah, 4-star recruit a season ago. You land Obot, a strong recruit out of the state of Idaho, top-ranked guy there. So there's some optimism and hope still for Utah's football recruiting class, but really would have been nice if they could have added that cherry on top too. One last wrinkle I'll just throw out there about just speaking of recruiting and everything. One thing just kind of funny about this year's matchup, John Henry Daly and Logan Fano could end up being the two starting defensive ends who are making some of the plays against BYU. So it is kind of interesting that we talk so much about Tanu Vasa, and he's clearly the best of that bunch. But it would be interesting to see if those former Cougars do end up making a difference this year for Utah.
It would be interesting because obviously BYU, when they had those two committed and obviously inside their program, they're very excited about the future for them. It's crazy how things change in college football, and it continues to change very quickly. I never would have thought in a million years, JT, that Tausili Akana was going to be on BYU's roster, but here we are. Nusi Taumwea Payao from Westlake High School. He was all dead set on going to Stanford. Guess what? He's in Provo now. It's crazy how quickly things can change. The nice part is there's talent and hope that it comes to bear and shows for both of these programs because, as I mentioned, I think both of these teams are going to be very, very competitive in the Big 12 this season.
I think BYU, even though I'm a little down on them from a win-loss perspective, I think Drake, shut up, Drake. Don't do this to me right now. Even though I do think BYU will still be a tough out week in and week out because of Jay Hill, because of Kalani Sitake. Those are two of the best coaches. And I know they obviously Sitake, the head, Hill, the coordinator, are still some of the best. This BYU team is going to be a tough out week in and week out. And that game, I said Utah's going to win it. It ain't going to be easy when they go down there. And I can obviously see BYU easily making some plays. And Utah's had seasons in the past where quarterbacks have gone to the wayside.
3 goggles. Let's go. 3 is coming, baby. Let's go.
I cannot wait for the next crossover we have in November or October. Should be in November. That's a whole nother discussion for another show, but we'll do it in October. But before we get to that matchup, we got so much great content coming your way. Locked On Cougars with Jake Hatch. Make sure you guys continue to like, subscribe, follow there. I'm Locked On Utes. JT Wistrcill here. Jake, it's always a blast, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me as always, JT. Hope you're well.
Hope you are well too, my friend, until you play Utah and then finally suffer that loss. That's going to do it for our show today. We look forward to seeing you guys on tomorrow's Locked On Utes and Locked On Cougars.